What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the reveal of number 23 in my power rankings. All the way down here, the Jacksonville Jaguars. The hype is just uncontainable for this team. NFL Network has them at 4th in their power rankings, 7th in ESPN. But for those that have been following these deep dives, you know there are two things with me. Number one is that I definitely do not overreact to hype. I'm going to call things like I see them. And when I believe in something, I'm not going to hide it just to please the majority. And that is definitely going to apply to this video. And the other theme that has been with this deep dives is you simply cannot take a team's performance from the year before and apply it to the new framework of a new season. Teams get a clean slate with injury. Momentum that this Jags team really rode on is wiped for every team. Teams get new rosters, new coaches, schedules are completely different. You're kidding yourselves if you don't think that schedule can really play a factor into how many wins a team can put up. There are just way too many factors going on. And by the way, year after year, 6 teams from the playoffs the year before do not make it the next year. So last year, I had videos just like this with the Giants and the Raiders. Sure enough, they disappointed. This year, my biggest gap between public opinion and what I believe happens is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I'm going to let you guys come after me in the comments because this is obviously pretty controversial, but I'm going to lay out right away here why I think that 2017 gives us plenty of reasons to see a drop-off in the Jags' performance this year. And we're going to get into some other reasons, but obviously, number one is Blake Bortles. When you have, by a landslide, the worst quarterback in your own division, it's going to get really tough to win football games consistently. Number two, this team, amidst a season where almost every team suffered significant injuries. Last year, if you remember, was unlike any year we've ever seen. And it was the healthy teams like Jacksonville and the Rams that took significant jumps. And I truly believe a large part of that was simply because they stayed healthy. Now, Jacksonville obviously showed a great defense, and they even had some games where their offense showed up. But you can't deny the importance of staying healthy, especially in the framework of last year's season. And then number 3 here is, can we please take a look at this schedule from last year for the Jags where they won 10 games, which, by the way, 10 games in the AFC last year, 4th in the power rankings, really? So let's just look at this team's wins last year. Obviously, they played this own division, and if you got to play Houston without Deshaun Watson in this division, you got 4 free wins as far as I'm concerned. So you can write those 4 wins off against the Colts and the Texans, and then write off a 5th win against Cleveland. So that is half of their wins from last year that I literally don't give a shit about. As long as you're not a bottom feeder, you better get 5 wins there. And then they beat Cincinnati, they beat Baltimore. Okay, good for you. Then they had Seattle at home. I worked this game for PFF, guys. Believe me, it might look a little better on paper, but this Seattle team was in free fall. I believe it was the next week when the Rams went into Seattle and beat them by like 40 points. That's not the same Seattle team we know. In the middle of this game against the Jaguars, they actually lost Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright. That Seattle team was scrambling. So even if you count that as a yellow win, an average win, they only had 2 wins that I'm even really going to acknowledge here. And that was at home against the Chargers. They won by 3. And then their one really win on the season that impressed me in Pittsburgh, who this team definitely has their number. And then the problem is, for every good win this team had, they had probably 2 more bad losses. So in their own division, when they got to play a competent Titans team, who, by the way, is much improved this year simply by getting rid of probably the worst coach in the NFL, Mike Mularkey, they got swept by the Titans last year. They lost to the Cardinals, and they lost to the frickin' Jets. And that's counting losses against Jimmy Garoppolo and the Rams as fine losses. So if you're really that impressed by what this team did in the regular season last year, then more power to you. But I can't look at what they were able to do last year and really come away that impressed. And then I know what you're going to say. Oh, but they went to the AFC Championship. Doesn't really matter what they did in the regular season because they got far in the playoffs. All right, slow down. They beat The wildly overachieving Buffalo Bills barely at home. They just might have lost that game if Tyrod Taylor didn't get hurt. Then they go and beat the Steelers again in a game that I'm pretty sure the Steelers weren't going to beat the Cleveland Browns that day. Carving through that defense was like going through hot butter for this Jags offense. If you think that the Jags scoring 45 points and giving up 42 points is a sustainable way to win tough football games for this Jags team in 2018, I think you should probably rethink that. And then, yes, they played the Patriots tough, but honestly, Patriots were a little overrated last year. I'm sorry. So those are my reasons for why I can't look at last season and project anything close in a revitalized league and a new landscape for this team to repeat. So that's the purpose of this video, right? Not looking at what they achieved last year, looking at what is this team this year, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and what can we expect as we look at the schedule for this team at the end of this video. So let's get into the positional grades here, ranking this team piece by piece. Blake Bortles at quarterback. The Jags come in here tied for 30th at that quarterback position. I really don't want to spend a lot of time here because I am that low on Blake Bortles. And if you are higher on Bortles, or if you're ready to commit to a team with such poor quarterback play, and I'm talking about lack of confidence, inaccuracy, terrible pocket awareness, zero play extension, a complete system quarterback who will also make mistakes. If you are ready to say that this Jags team can win with that and repeat what they did last year, that's fine. But this team is going to have to neuter that position, do the best they can to run the ball and play defense. And when you have so significantly the worst quarterback in your own division, that is a really tough game plan to keep up. So what really is important for this team, and repeating from last year, is everyone around Blake Bortles. Because if they are good, it's not going to be because of him. And this really does come down to, can this be a top 24 offense, a competent enough offense to at least give this defense a breather and score, 20 points a game? Or is it going to be, frankly, closer to what I see it as a borderline incompetent offense? Now, this offense really only has one identity and one fallback, and if it's working in certain games, they're going to look all right. And this is what really worked in the playoffs for them against like Pittsburgh and New England. But as you saw, by the way, I'm talking about the running game against the Bills, who could shut down the run, neutralize Leonard Fournette. This offense has nothing to work with. So the running backs do come in at tied for 12th. I like Leonard Fournette. He's a one-trick pony, but that one trick is really tough. Inside running, true power, very similar to Adrian Peterson, stylistically at least, though I don't think he's that far off of what AP was. But the problem here is, in the modern NFL, we are seeing more and more that the ability to receive and catch the ball out of the backfield is significant for running backs, and Leonard Fournette doesn't really offer much of that. So that's what TJ Yeldon and Corey Grant are there for. They're fine. Neither of them are elite receiving backs. But basically, when this run game is working, it's going to look pretty good. But there's only a select few teams where they're pretty soft up the middle where you can rely on that. And that transitions to these receivers. It's basically a motley crew where you got a bunch of dudes that have kind of one specific skill set. You do have Keelan Cole, who's pretty well balanced, but then after that, Marquise Lee, I see him as kind of a short to intermediate guy, good with the ball in his hands, but not very consistent down the field. Dante Moncrief, I don't really know why they brought him in here. So what is he, a red zone threat? He never reached his ceiling in Indianapolis. I don't see why the hell that would change here in Jacksonville. Then they draft DJ Chark. I get it to be that deep threat, but no way did I see him as a second round value. They let Allen Robinson go here clearly to say, A, we want to use that money and pay Andrew Norwell on the offensive line, which is more consistent with what we want to do. But they basically are saying, if we're going to win on offense, it's not because of our passing game. And these receivers, frankly, don't matter that much. At tight end, you do have Safarian Jenkins, Niles Paul. Interesting considering neither of them are, really great blockers. Niles Paul actually compares very similarly to Quincy Enunwa with the Jets. So I guess it'll be interesting to see if he actually plays tight end or kind of that U tight end, slot wide receiver type. But just a motley crew of receivers here. Keep an eye on Allen Lazard. Feels like every year we get an undrafted free agent breakout for the Jags. Remember Allen Hurns, Keelan Cole last year. Could that be Allen Lazard now? I think he's actually a better red zone threat than Dante Moncrief. So overall, I don't love this receiving core. They do come in at 29th. But again, stylistically, this team doesn't really care what they get from wide receiver. But that is only going to make it so much harder in those games when the run game isn't working and they do need to pass the ball, which is going to happen at multiple points in this season. It's a passing league. You can't avoid passing the ball to stay in games. And between Blake Bortles and this receiving core, they're going to have some issues. And then this offensive line, again, very run-oriented. Cam Robinson, the left tackle, very run-oriented. Inconsistent as a pass blocker, just a second-year player. You know, maybe he can develop in the pass game, but I don't necessarily see that happening. I actually see him as more of a guard down the road. I did really like the Andrew Norwell signing. I'm always a fan of building to your strengths, and that's what they're doing. They're trying to be elite in the trenches with Fournette and this interior where you also have Brandon Linder, and they brought back AJ Cann, who developed better than I think anyone else on this offensive line last year. So from left guard to right guard, really good. I do have concerns about these tackles in pass pro. Jeremy Purnell is fine as a right tackle. They do draft Will Richardson in the 4th round. Bit of a project, but if anything were to happen at tackle, I think he could plug in and be okay. The rest of the depth here, nothing really to speak of. So while this line has improved from what it once was like 2 years ago, they do come in 19th here. Really run-oriented group, which is, of course, the theme here with this offense is run the ball or bust. They understand that their only hope to win, at least consistently, is going to be run the ball and play great defense. So let's break down this defense here. Obviously, a very good defense. And we break down the front 7 in terms of run defense, pass rush, and linebackers as far as my power rankings are concerned. And this is really probably one of my worst calls from these deep dives last year. We had a very good year predicting things, but Jacksonville was the team I was most off on. So I'm doubling down again here, projecting them to disappoint. We'll see what happens. But this pass rush surprised myself and a lot of people. So they bring in Calais Campbell, who was a 3-4 DN, more of an interior guy. And he comes in and he actually plays like a top edge rusher. It's 43 pressures, a bunch of sacks. So that was a huge spark for this defense. And that was definitely the turning point because we knew the secondary was going to be pretty good. But getting that boost at the pass rush really played off of that as well. And then Ngakoue took a huge step forward in his development as a really good speed rusher. 42 hurries for him. So you got a really good combo there. And then a guy I'm actually really excited to watch this year is Dante Fowler. I thought when he was on the field, he actually looked much improved this year. Now, obviously, he was kind of put into a rotational role here, but the way he's grown physically kind of reminds me of what DeMarcus Lawrence did. Obviously, Fowler was drafted with a top 4 pick to have this crazy upside, was kind of looked at as a bust to this point, but his pressure rate was actually higher than Yannick Ngakoue and Calais Campbell last season. So consider Dante Fowler on a list of 10 or so breakout candidates for next year. And I could absolutely see him kind of, I don't know if phasing out is the right word, but being that next man up as Calais Campbell gets older here. And then you're going to have a really exciting young duo with Ngakoue and Dante Fowler. Then you've also got DeJuan Smoot, who's had very little opportunities here, but he was taken in the 3rd round to contribute here before they kind of knew that they had this dominant edge rush. Really liked him coming out of Illinois. So they do come in tied for 10th, which, it might be a little lower than you expect Saxonville to be at. They were 11th in the NFL in pressures last year. So maybe tied for 10th with one other team. Could be considered too low. Most of the teams above them are going to be your teams with your Von Millers, Everson Griffin, guys that I still think are maybe a slight tier above Calais Campbell. I know that Campbell showed some awesome stuff last year, but I don't know if I'm projecting him to necessarily completely repeat what he did, if that makes sense. So I don't want to diss this pass rush. It's going to be very good. But there are teams that I think are a little better at getting after the quarterback. And you do throw Malik Jackson in there as well. He can definitely provide some interior rush. So let's switch over talking about those interior guys and the run defense. Again, run defense kind of devalued in the modern NFL. Not a huge gap between the best and the worst teams in the league at defending the run anyway, but still worth talking about. This team is obviously going to be very tough against the run. They come in 7th in the NFL in terms of run defense. Just a super deep D-line group. You got Marcel Darius, Aubrey Jones, and Malik Jackson. Calais Campbell plays the run extremely well. And then you got a really good group of linebackers here. So not going to be easy to run the ball on this team, which means you got to pass against this team, which is not good news because the secondary is so good. First, let's talk about the linebackers here. Super athletic group of linebackers. They come in tied for 4th with 3 other teams. And this linebacker grade has much more weight put into the coverage ability of these guys. And obviously Telvin Smith, Miles Jack, can make the argument both those guys are top 10 cover linebackers. You got Blair Brown there as kind of the 3rd middle linebacker who's going to play now that Paul Posluszny is gone. A pretty diminished role in this scheme as that 3rd linebacker. They're really only running quote-unquote base defense, probably 10-15% of plays anyway. It's a lot of nickel here. And then keep an eye on Leon Jacobs as well. Versatile linebacker coming out of Wisconsin, a 7th round pick here, but a super athlete. This team's done a good job developing athletic linebackers. Would not be surprised if Jacobs was a great fit in this scheme. I actually think a decent comparison for him is Anthony Barr, who, those that have followed this channel, know I'm not super high on Anthony Barr, but in the right scheme can do some really nice things. So keep an eye on Leon Jacobs. And now let's talk about this secondary. Exciting group, but not really a whole lot to talk about. Jalen Ramsey can certainly make the argument as the best corner in the NFL. I believe that. And then AJ Boye, certainly not a bad number 2 on your team. Would be the number 1 on, I don't know, 15, 20 other teams in the league. Something around there. Now, they signed DJ Hayden to potentially be the starting nickel corner here. That's a pretty big drop-off from what they had last year. They're going to have to figure out who's going to succeed in the nickel here. And as far as the depth is concerned, really just not a fan of the depth here at all. So if anything did happen to Ramsey or Boye, this team would instantly be in a lot of trouble at corner. I live in Minnesota. I watched a lot of Jalen Myrick. Really think he's kind of just a track star. Ran that 4.3 40. Not sure he has a ton of skill to his game, but I guess we could find out. And then the safeties here, you got the 2 vets, Tashawn Gibson, Barry Church. Really good compliment. Gibson better in coverage, Church better in run defense. But that traditional free safety, strong safety complement there. Neither of these guys getting any younger though. They take Ronnie Harrison, which was a total steal in the 3rd round. Barry Church actually a very good comparison for Ronnie Harrison. So that should be a seamless transition in the next 2 years or so. Kind of a changing of the guards at strong safety. And then they signed Cody Davis, kind of a freak athlete they bring in from the Rams. They got Don Carey wrapping up the secondary here. So overall, this defense actually does come in at 9th, which might seem a little low. I think it's important to not forget that this team did give up 42 points in the playoffs to the Steelers. They gave up like 45, I think it was, to the 49ers in the regular season. Like, this wasn't the 85 Bears, which if you followed football from like the end of December to January, you might have thought that this was like this historic defense. It's a very good defense, don't get me wrong. It's very sound and is going to be one of the most consistent. But when you factor in the fact that they're going to be on the field a lot because of what this offense does, and the fact that I think this team in general is in for a little bit of an awakening, realizing that they're not quite as good as they thought they were. But you factor all that in and it drops them down just a little bit, but still a top 10 defense. Definitely going to keep them in games. The question is, can this offense that ranks 30th do anything to win those close games? So with that, let's get into the schedule here. And this is possibly the most important part of breaking down this Jags team, because we already looked at how easy their schedule was the year before. Well, new landscape of the NFL, division's better, things change. Much harder schedule this year. They got to start at the Giants. I gave them a loss. Then they play New England at home. I gave them a loss. Tennessee at home. Couldn't do that last year, but I gave them a win. They got the Jets at home. Couldn't beat the Jets last year, but I gave them that. So starting 2-2. Then they got to go to Kansas City. It's hard for any team to win there. You got to go to Dallas. So now I got them at 2-4, and this team is entering that rude awakening that I was talking about with this defense. Then they got Houston. I actually gave them a win against the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, but that's got a question mark next to it. You got to go to Indianapolis and beat Andrew Luck. You got Pittsburgh, who this team had their number last year, but that team is going to be playing pissed off because this is the team that ruined their season last year. I think they either win this and lose in Philly, or the other way around. I have a hard time seeing them win both of those games, but they are both at home. Then you got to go to Buffalo. That's not easy. You got Indianapolis, at Tennessee, Washington, at Miami, and at Houston. So down the stretch there's some very winnable games that if they can get some on the front end will be more meaningful. But overall, you're playing a lot of really good teams here. And again, that Blake Bortles factor, it's just going to be hard to be consistent, period. So while I admit I was wrong on Jacksonville's defense heading into last season, and you can say I'm still low on them now, having them at 9th. While I'll admit that that defense is great, I just don't think it's going to be enough. And Vegas actually, in a way, agrees with me because they have their over-under at 9.5 this year, so below what they had last year. But betting under on that pays -160, which means Vegas thinks it is significantly more likely that this team goes under 9 wins than over. I would much rather that actually be 8.5 and pay much better for me to say I love this bet. If you can get this bet under 9.5 wins for anything like -110, I would hammer the hell out of that. Seems like a great value. So while the media is buying into this Jags team, it does not look like the betting community has. So I've got them going 6-10. Their win range of 5 to 9. Jags fans, let me hear it. I get it. 6 teams, guys. 6 teams from the playoffs before do not make it the next year on average. So it's got to be someone. If you're a fan of other NFL teams, what do you think? Have I sold you on the Jags being overrated, or do you think I'm insane? Let me know. If you like the video, do like it. Helps me out more than you'll ever know. As always, guys, cheers, and we'll see you next time.